It was never supposed to be opened. Hidden among the Queen's most guarded possessions lay a final diary, one believed to contain her most private thoughts, her unfiltered truth. But now, in a revelation no one saw coming, Princess Anne has stepped forward, and what she's revealed about Camilla has left the monarchy shaken to its core. Because this wasn't just a diary entry, it was a final message. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What began as a quiet discovery, something handled with the utmost discretion, quickly transformed into a moment that could no longer remain contained. The diary was not found by accident. It was located among the Queen's most personal belongings, sealed away in a place that suggested intention, not oversight. This was not a document meant for public eyes. It was something preserved, protected, almost as if it carried a weight that required distance from the world she had spent her life serving. Those who first encountered it understood immediately that this was different. Not official correspondence, not ceremonial reflection, but something deeply personal written without performance, without restraint, without the careful language that had defined her public voice for decades. And within those pages, there were passages that stood out, not because they were loud, but because they were honest in a way that the Queen had rarely allowed herself to be. Subtle, precise, yet undeniably revealing. Especially when it came to Camilla. At first, the instinct within the palace was clear: contain it, protect it, preserve the silence that had always surrounded matters too sensitive to surface. Because once words like these are seen, they cannot be unseen. Once they are heard, they cannot be unheard. And more importantly, once they are shared, they cannot be taken back. The risk was not just reputational. It was structural, emotional, historical, the kind of risk that does not simply pass, it lingers, reshaping perception in ways that cannot be controlled. But then came Princess Anne. Quiet, measured, and known for her unwavering sense of duty, she was not expected to disrupt that silence. If anything, she was expected to uphold it. Which is why her decision carried such impact. She was not chosen by circumstance, she was trusted. Trusted to understand the meaning behind the words, to recognize their significance, and perhaps most importantly, to decide what should be done with them. And in that position, she made a choice that few could have predicted. It was not impulsive. It was not careless. It was deliberate. A decision that suggested she believed the contents of that diary were not just personal reflections, but something more. Something that needed to be acknowledged, even if doing so meant unsettling the balance that had been carefully maintained for years. Because the moment she chose to reveal even a part of what had been written, the entire dynamic shifted. The tension was immediate, not explosive, not yet but present, undeniable. Questions began to form before answers could even be considered. Why now? Why this? And perhaps most importantly, what exactly had the Queen chosen to write, in a space where she no longer needed to protect anyone but her own truth? Because whatever was contained within those pages was never meant to shape the future. And yet now, it threatened to do exactly that. But what exactly did the Queen write? And why would Princess Anne risk everything to reveal it now? For years, the relationship between Queen Elizabeth and Camilla was defined not by words but by silence. Public acceptance, private restraint. What appeared calm on the surface masked something far more complicated underneath. And now, with the diary opened, that silence is beginning to speak, revealing emotions and thoughts the Queen never allowed the world to see while she was alive. It is easy, looking back, to believe that everything unfolded with quiet harmony, that acceptance came naturally, gradually, without resistance. But that version of events was always carefully constructed, shaped by necessity rather than truth. Because within the monarchy, perception is not just important, it is essential. And for years, perception told a story of unity that reality struggled to fully support. Camilla's path into the royal family was never simple, and the Queen understood that better than anyone. Every step forward was measured, every public gesture deliberate, every acknowledgement carefully calibrated. There were no sudden embraces, no dramatic declarations. Instead, there was patience, controlled, precise, and unwavering. The Queen did not reveal emotion easily, especially not in matters that carried both personal and institutional weight. And so, what the world saw was composure. What it did not see was complexity. Because behind that composed exterior, there were moments small, almost imperceptible, where distance could be felt. Not openly expressed, not spoken aloud, but present in ways that those closest to the inner circle could not ignore. A pause where warmth might have been expected. A formality that lingered just a little longer than necessary. These were not signs of rejection, but they were not signs of complete acceptance either. They existed in between, in a space where duty and personal feeling quietly collided. Princess Anne witnessed this dynamic in a way few others could. She was not just an observer of public appearances, she was part of the private reality behind them. She understood the discipline required to maintain the image of unity, the effort it took to ensure that personal complexities never disrupted the institution's stability. And because of that, she also understood what was never said. The conversations that remained unfinished. The emotions that were acknowledged internally, but never allowed to surface externally. What makes this revelation so powerful is not that it introduces something entirely new, it is that it confirms what had only ever been suspected. That beneath the surface of royal composure, there existed a tension that could not be fully resolved, only managed. The Queen's approach was never about confrontation. It was about control. About maintaining balance, even when that balance required silence. But silence by its nature does not erase truth. It only delays it. And over time, that truth finds its way out not through public statements, not through formal acknowledgement, but through moments like this. Through words written in private, without the need to protect an image, without the obligation to uphold a narrative. Words that carry weight precisely because they were never meant to be shared. And now, as those words begin to surface, they do more than reveal personal feeling, they reshape understanding. They force a reconsideration of everything that was once taken at face value, exposing layers that had remained hidden for years. Because what was once seen as simple acceptance now appears far more complex, far more human, and far more unresolved than anyone had truly realized. And when those unspoken thoughts finally surfaced on paper, they revealed something far more powerful than anyone expected. It was just a few lines, written quietly, without audience, without intention of ever being seen. But those lines carried a weight that would shake the monarchy to its core. According to Princess Anne, the Queen's words about Camilla were not what anyone expected. Not diplomatic. Not neutral. But deeply personal, and impossible to ignore once revealed. When Anne finally chose to share what had been written, the atmosphere shifted instantly, as if something long buried had suddenly surfaced with a force no one could contain. The entry itself was not lengthy, not dramatic in structure, but it did not need to be. Every word felt deliberate, stripped of the restraint that had defined the Queen's public voice for decades. What made it so powerful was its honesty. There was no careful phrasing, no attempt to soften the meaning. Instead, there was clarity, quiet but unmistakable. The kind of clarity that only appears when there is no longer a need to protect anyone else. And within that clarity, there were hints of something unresolved. Not anger, not outright rejection, but something more complex. A sense of reflection mixed with concern. Of acceptance that had been reached, but perhaps never fully settled. The language, as described by Anne, carried an emotional weight that stood in sharp contrast to everything the public had come to believe. Where the world had seen composure, the diary revealed depth. Where the public narrative suggested closure, the words suggested something still lingering beneath the surface. It was not a contradiction, it was a layer that had never been allowed to show. And now that it had, it changed everything. There were phrases subtle, carefully chosen that seemed to point toward moments of doubt, of quiet questioning. Not accusations, not judgments, but reflections that hinted at an internal struggle the Queen had carried without ever expressing it outwardly. And perhaps that was what made it so unsettling. These were not the words of a monarch addressing her people. These were the thoughts of a woman, writing without audience, without expectation, allowing herself to be honest in a way she never could in public. Inside the palace, the reaction was immediate and controlled. But beneath that control was unmistakable concern. Those who understood the significance of such words recognized the risk instantly. This was not just a personal reflection, it had the potential to reshape perception, to reopen conversations that had long been considered settled. And once those conversations began again, there would be no easy way to guide them back into silence. For Camilla, the implications were profound. These were not external criticisms or public opinions, this was something far more difficult to navigate. The private thoughts of the Queen, revealed after her passing, carried a weight that could not be dismissed or defended against. They existed outside the realm of response, beyond the reach of clarification. And in that space, they began to define something new, not just how the past was understood, but how her place within it would be remembered. What made the moment even more intense was the realization that this was only a fragment. Just one entry, one glimpse into a perspective that had remained hidden for years. And if this was what had been written in just a few lines, it raised an even more unsettling question: what else had been left unsaid? Because sometimes, the most powerful truths are not the ones spoken publicly, but the ones written in private, waiting to be discovered long after they were meant to remain hidden. And as those words continued to echo, one detail began to stand out above everything else, not just what was written, but when it had been written. But what made these words even more shocking was not just what they said, but when they were written. The timing of the diary entry changes everything. Written in the Queen's final months, these weren't distant reflections, they were current, immediate, and deeply relevant. And that raises a chilling question. What had happened so close to the end that compelled the Queen to finally put these thoughts into words? This was not memory revisiting the past with softened edges. This was clarity, formed in the present, shaped by something recent enough to still carry emotional weight. And that detail alone transforms the entire meaning of what was written. Because when words like these are recorded at the end of a lifetime defined by restraint, they are not accidental, they are intentional. Princess Anne understood this better than anyone, and it is why she placed such emphasis on the timing. She did not present the entry as a general reflection, but as something anchored in a specific moment. A moment that had not yet been publicly understood. Her insistence on this detail was not casual, it was deliberate, as if she were pointing toward something just beyond reach, something that had not yet been revealed but could not be ignored once acknowledged. And in doing so, she shifted the focus from what was written to why it was written then. Inside the palace, this realization sparked a different kind of concern. Not just about the content, but about the context. Because if the Queen felt compelled to record these thoughts in her final months, it suggested that something had changed. Something significant enough to break through decades of discipline. Decades of choosing silence over expression. The question was no longer whether there had been complexity in her relationship with Camilla that had already been established. The question now was what had brought that complexity to the surface at such a critical moment. Speculation began to take shape, quietly at first, then with growing intensity. There were suggestions of conversations that had not gone as expected, of tensions that had been managed for years but had recently shifted in tone or significance. Nothing confirmed, nothing publicly acknowledged, but the timing made it impossible to dismiss the possibility that something had occurred behind closed doors. Something that altered the Queen's perspective enough to put it into writing. What makes this even more unsettling is the sense of urgency within the act itself. The Queen did not have to write this. She had spent a lifetime mastering the art of withholding, of preserving stability through silence. And yet, in those final months, she chose differently. That choice carries meaning. It suggests a need not to announce, not to confront, but to record. To ensure that what she felt, what she understood, would not disappear with her. For those closest to the situation, this is where the discomfort deepens. Because the closer the timeline moves toward the end, the less room there is for interpretation. These are not distant emotions. They are immediate. And that immediacy points toward something unresolved, something that may never have been fully addressed. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of all. Not just that the Queen had these thoughts, but that she carried them into her final days, choosing to leave them behind rather than resolve them in life. Because that suggests something incomplete, something left open. And as attention turns toward those final days, toward the conversations, the decisions, the moments that may have led to this entry, One thing becomes increasingly clear: this story is not confined to a page. It extends beyond it, into a space that has yet to be fully uncovered. And as those final days are examined more closely, a deeper layer of the story begins to emerge. Princess Anne has always been known for her loyalty, quiet, unwavering, and absolute. So why would she choose to reveal something so sensitive now? This wasn't just a disclosure. It was a decision, a deliberate act that risks disrupting the very institution she has spent her life protecting. And that raises the most difficult question of all. What forced her hand? For someone who has built her entire identity around discipline and discretion, this moment feels almost out of character, and that is exactly what makes it so significant. Anne is not driven by impulse. She does not act for attention, nor does she step outside established boundaries without reason. So if she has chosen to speak now, it suggests that silence was no longer an option. For years, she has been one of the monarchy's most trusted figures, not because she seeks influence, but because she understands the weight of responsibility. She has seen crises come and go, tensions rise and fall, always managed with the same careful balance between truth and preservation. And through all of it, she has remained consistent, measured, composed, and loyal above all else. Which is why this moment carries such emotional depth. It is not just about what she revealed. It is about what it cost her to reveal it. Because this was not information she stumbled upon. It was something entrusted to her, something she carried with full awareness of its implications. The Queen's final words were not meant to be shared lightly, if at all. And for a long time, it seems that Anne honored that unspoken expectation, holding on to them with the same quiet strength she has always shown. But over time, that burden began to change. What once felt like a responsibility to protect may have started to feel like a responsibility to confront. There are indications that this decision was not made in isolation, that within the palace there were differing views on what should be done. Some believed the diary should remain sealed, its contents preserved as part of the Queen's private legacy. Others may have recognized that the longer it remained hidden, the more complicated its eventual revelation would become. And somewhere within that divide, Anne found herself at the center not just as a custodian of the truth, but as someone forced to decide what that truth demanded. Emotionally, the weight of that decision is impossible to ignore. To carry the final thoughts of someone who defined an era, and then to choose to share them, knowing the impact it would have, it is not a simple act. It requires a level of conviction that goes beyond duty. It suggests belief. A belief that these words matter, not just personally, but historically. That they serve a purpose beyond the moment in which they were written. And perhaps that is the most revealing aspect of all. Anne does not appear to be acting out of disruption, but out of necessity. As if she believes that understanding the Queen's true perspective is essential, even if it complicates the narrative that has been carefully maintained. Even if it creates tension. Even if it forces the monarchy to confront something it would rather leave untouched. Because sometimes, loyalty is not about protecting silence. Sometimes, it is about revealing truth no matter how difficult that truth may be. And once that truth is spoken, it does not remain contained. It moves. It spreads. It begins to shape everything around it in ways that cannot be controlled. And as Anne's words begin to echo beyond the walls where they were first spoken, the impact becomes impossible to contain, reaching far beyond what anyone inside the palace may have anticipated. But as Anne speaks, the consequences begin to unfold, and they reach further than anyone anticipated. As the revelation spreads, all eyes turn to Camilla. How does one respond to words written by a queen after she's gone? Silence could protect her, but it could also condemn her. And behind palace walls, the reaction is said to be far from calm, because this isn't just about reputation anymore. It's about legacy. At first, her response appears controlled, almost measured to the point of detachment, as if years of royal discipline instinctively took over in a moment that demanded absolute composure. But beneath that surface, the weight of what has been revealed is impossible to ignore. These are not public criticisms that can be addressed, clarified, or reframed. These are private reflections, written without expectation of defense, now standing alone, unchallenged and unchangeable. What makes this moment so volatile is the position it places her in. To respond risks giving the words even greater significance. To remain silent risks allowing them to define her without resistance. And in that tension, every decision becomes complicated. Every reaction becomes meaningful. Because this is no longer about perception in the present, it is about how history will remember her. Shaped not by public narratives, but by the personal thoughts of the queen herself. Inside the palace, the atmosphere shifts quickly. What was once contained now feels exposed, and with that exposure comes pressure. Conversations become more urgent, more guarded, as those closest to the situation attempt to understand what this means not just for Camilla, but for the institution as a whole. There are indications that efforts are being made to manage the situation, to guide how the revelation is interpreted, to prevent it from escalating further. But the challenge is clear. This is not something that can be easily controlled. Once private words enter the public space, they begin to take on a life of their own. Emotionally, the impact runs deeper than any public statement could capture. To be confronted with the Queen's final written thoughts that carry both authority and intimacy, is a burden that cannot be shared or deflected. It is personal in a way that no external criticism could ever be. And within that personal weight lies a quiet, unresolved tension. Not just about what was written, but about what it suggests, about what it reveals that had never been spoken. The ripple effect extends beyond Camilla herself. Within the family, dynamics begin to shift in subtle but significant ways. Relationships that once relied on unspoken understanding now carry a new layer of complexity. There is awareness now heightened, unavoidable, that something has been revealed that cannot be undone. And with that awareness comes distance, hesitation, a recalibration of roles that had once felt secure. At the same time, uncertainty begins to take hold regarding her future within the monarchy. Not in immediate terms, not in any official capacity, but in perception, in influence, in how she is positioned moving forward. Because legacy is not defined in a single moment, but moments like this have the power to reshape it entirely. And as the tension continues to build, one reality becomes increasingly clear. This is not a situation that will fade quietly. It is unfolding, expanding, moving beyond the control of those who wish to contain it. Because once something like this is revealed, it does not stay confined to the walls where it began. It reaches outward, shaping opinion, influencing perception, and creating a narrative that no one can fully control. And while the palace struggles to contain the fallout, the world outside is already forming its own judgment. Within hours, the revelation ignited a global reaction. Headlines exploded. Opinions clashed. Support turned into skepticism, and long-held beliefs about the royal family were suddenly questioned. Because when a queen's private words become public, they don't just inform, they transform everything people thought they knew. The speed of the reaction was relentless, almost overwhelming, as if the world had been waiting for something like this without even realizing it. News channels broke into regular programming. Analysts rushed to interpret fragments of information. And within moments, the story was no longer confined to one narrative, it had become many, each more intense than the last. The media seized on every detail, not just reporting what had been revealed, but attempting to define what it meant. Words were chosen carefully, yet carried unmistakable weight: final thoughts, hidden truth, royal tension. Each headline pushed the story further, amplifying its significance, turning a private reflection into a global discussion. And as the coverage expanded, it became clear that this was not just another royal controversy. It was something deeper, something that challenged the foundation of how the monarchy had been understood for generations. Public reaction followed quickly, and it did not settle into a single direction. Some voices rose in support of Princess Anne, praising what they saw as courage, as a commitment to honesty in an institution often criticized for its secrecy. To them, this was transparency, long overdue. But others viewed it differently. They questioned the timing, the intention, the impact. Was this a necessary revelation or an unnecessary disruption? Was it truth being honored or stability being risked? The divide was immediate, and it only continued to widen. Social media intensified everything. What might have remained a controlled discussion became a constant stream of emotion, speculation, and interpretation. Every perspective found a platform. Every reaction gained momentum. Fragments of the story were shared, reshaped, sometimes exaggerated, creating a cycle that moved faster than any official response could follow. In that environment, nuance began to disappear, replaced by certainty that was not always grounded in fact, but in feeling. And with that surge of attention came a deeper layer of questioning. If something this significant had remained hidden until now, what else might still be concealed? What other thoughts, conversations, or decisions had been kept out of public view? The revelation did not just answer questions, it created new ones, more complex, more unsettling. It shifted focus from a single diary entry to the broader issue of transparency within the monarchy itself. The institution, long defined by its ability to maintain control over its narrative, now faced a challenge it could not easily manage. The story had moved beyond its reach, shaped by voices outside its influence, evolving in ways that could not be predicted or contained. And as that narrative continued to grow, the pressure on the monarchy intensified, not just to respond, but to adapt. Because this was no longer about a single revelation. It was about perception, about trust, about whether the image that had been presented for so long still aligned with the reality now beginning to emerge. And in that shifting space, uncertainty began to take hold, not just within the public, but within the institution itself. As the noise grew louder, as opinions multiplied and interpretations deepened, one realization began to surface beneath it all. The most important part of this story had not yet been fully understood. Because beyond the reactions, beyond the headlines, beyond the speculation, there remained a question, one that had not been answered. One that could change everything depending on how it was understood. But beneath the noise, one question remains unanswered, and it may be the most important one of all. Was this truly the Queen's final judgment, or just a moment captured in time? As the world debates the meaning of her words, a deeper question emerges. How should a legacy be defined? By public actions or private thoughts? Because what Princess Anne has revealed doesn't just challenge Camilla, it challenges how we understand the Queen herself. For decades, the Queen existed as a symbol of consistency, of measured restraint, of unwavering control. Every word she spoke publicly carried intention, shaped carefully to preserve stability above all else. But now, those private words introduce something unfamiliar: emotion that was never filtered for public consumption. Thoughts that were never meant to carry institutional weight, yet now seem impossible to separate from it. This is where the tension begins to deepen. Because a diary entry, by its nature, is incomplete. It captures a moment, a feeling, a reflection tied to a specific time and state of mind. It is not a full narrative, not a final conclusion. And yet, when that moment belongs to someone whose life defined an entire era, it becomes something more. It invites interpretation. It demands meaning. And in doing so, it risks becoming something it was never intended to be: a definitive statement. The world now finds itself trying to reconcile two versions of the same figure. The Queen as she was seen, composed, consistent, carefully neutral. And the Queen as she appears through these words, reflective, complex, perhaps even conflicted. Neither version cancels the other. But together, they create a tension that cannot be easily resolved. Because if both are true, then the simplicity that once defined her legacy no longer holds. This is where the danger of interpretation begins to take shape. Without context, without the full scope of her thoughts, the diary entry becomes vulnerable to selective understanding. Some may view it as confirmation of long-held suspicions, others as a moment of personal reflection that should not be expanded beyond its original intent. And between those interpretations lies a space of uncertainty, one that grows wider the more it is discussed. Princess Anne's role in all of this becomes increasingly significant. By choosing to reveal the entry, she has not just shared information, she has influenced how it will be understood. The tone she sets, the emphasis she places, the context she provides or withholds, all of it shapes the narrative that follows. And while her intention may be rooted in honesty, the impact of that honesty is not fixed. It evolves, depending on how it is received. Within the monarchy, this creates a delicate challenge. Unity depends on clarity, on a shared understanding of what the institution represents. But moments like this introduce ambiguity, and ambiguity is difficult to manage. It opens space for doubt, for differing perspectives, for tensions that are harder to contain because they are not clearly defined. And as those tensions grow, the effort to maintain a consistent narrative becomes increasingly complex. Because the truth, in this context, is not simple. It is layered. It exists in fragments, shaped by perspective, influenced by timing, and complicated by emotion. And perhaps that is what makes this moment so powerful. Not just what has been revealed, but what it represents: the idea that even within the most controlled institutions, even within the most disciplined lives, there are layers that remain hidden until they are no longer meant to be. And as those layers continue to surface, as interpretations continue to shift, one reality becomes impossible to ignore. This is no longer just about understanding the past, it is about navigating what that understanding means for the future. And as the meaning of those words continues to unfold, the future of the monarchy hangs in the balance. This isn't just about the past, it's about what comes next. A single diary entry has triggered questions that may never fully be answered, tensions that may never fully fade. And as the monarchy faces this moment of uncertainty, one thing becomes clear. The future will not be shaped by silence anymore, but by the truths that refuse to stay hidden. What once felt like a contained revelation has now expanded into something far more enduring. Something that continues to echo through every level of the institution. Because moments like this do not simply pass, they linger, reshaping how decisions are made, how relationships are managed, and how power is understood. At the center of this evolving landscape stand William and Charles, navigating a situation that neither can ignore, yet neither can fully control. For Charles, the challenge is immediate and deeply personal. The legacy he has inherited is now intertwined with a revelation that complicates the narrative he has spent years trying to stabilize. For William, the implications stretch even further into the future. This is not just a situation to manage, it is a signal of the kind of monarchy he may one day lead. And the question that now follows him is unavoidable: how does he balance tradition with a growing demand for truth? Camilla's position remains one of the most uncertain elements in this unfolding story. She has not been removed, not publicly challenged, yet something has undeniably shifted. The stability that once surrounded her role now feels less secure, not because of immediate action, but because of perception. And in a system where perception shapes reality, that shift carries weight. It raises questions about influence, about acceptance, about how her place within the monarchy will be defined moving forward. Outside the palace, public trust enters a fragile phase. The revelation has not just informed, it has unsettled. It has opened a door that cannot easily be closed, inviting scrutiny that extends beyond a single moment into the broader structure of the monarchy itself. People are no longer just observing, they are questioning. And once that questioning begins, it rarely stops. It builds, it evolves, it demands more. This is where the pressure for transparency begins to take shape. Not as a choice, but as a necessity. The monarchy, long defined by its ability to control information, now faces a reality where control is no longer absolute. Expectations are shifting. Silence, once seen as strength, is now viewed with suspicion. And in that shift lies a new kind of challenge, one that cannot be resolved through tradition alone. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of all is the sense that this is not the end. That what has been revealed is only part of a larger story, one that has yet to fully unfold. Because if a single diary entry can carry this much impact, it raises an even more difficult question: what else remains hidden? What other thoughts, decisions, or moments exist beneath the surface, waiting for their own moment to emerge? That uncertainty lingers, quietly but persistently, shaping everything that follows. Because the monarchy is no longer just dealing with what has been revealed, it is now defined by what might still be discovered. And in that space of anticipation, tension continues to build, not loudly, but steadily. Because in the royal family, the past is never truly buried, and the next revelation may already be waiting to be uncovered. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.